So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
All right, you guys, welcome back. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. Website is scotthorton.org. You can find all my interview archives there, more than 3,000 of them now, going back to 2003. Our first guest on the show today is our friend Greg Mitchell. First of all, you should look him up at Amazon.com. Better yet, at scotthorton.org/Amazon. And then check out Atomic Cover-Up, So Wrong for So Long, Hiroshima in America. A lot more, but I'm trying to flip through all the nuclear ones first. Hollywood Bomb, of course, and then The Age of WikiLeaks and a lot of other ones. Welcome back to the show. Greg, how are you doing?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing quite well, thank you.
All right, good deal. Very happy to have you on here. Oh, yeah, Truth and Consequences, the U.S. versus Private Man. That's a great one there. Appreciate that work with Kevin Gostola. All right, so, I have you here because it's Hiroshima Day, and hard to believe it's already that time again to talk about the nuclear explosions over Japan with you, Greg. I believe it was Zora Neale Hurston who called Harry Truman the butcher of Asia. And, in fact, there's an article today in the San Jose Mercury News by Barton J. Bernstein, who is a conservative from Stanford University, called American Conservatives Are the Forgotten Critics of the Atomic Bombing of Japan. It's kind of maybe a fun little place to start this interview with kind of the roles reversed from what we would typically think of as the dove-hawk position here in the U.S. today.
Yeah, Bart Bernstein. I've met him many years ago, and he's been quoted in some of my books.
And can you talk about at the time some of the conservative critics of the war, even within the military? Right, it was not. The way I learned about it in 5th grade was, hey, had to be done. What are you going to do?
Right,
if it didn't have to be done, it wouldn't have been done, right? But apparently that was not the consensus at the time.
Well, it was divided. General Eisenhower famously opposed it. Told Truman, Secretary of War, in advance of using the bomb that we shouldn't hit them with that awful thing, as he put it. Admiral Leahy, who was Truman's top military chief of staff, was against the use of the bomb. General MacArthur later said that we didn't have to use it, although some people think he was upset because he wanted to get in on the kill in an invasion himself. So. Yeah. But there were other conservatives, David Lawrence, who was the founder of U.S. News and World Report, a very well-known conservative writer and editor at the time, said that, we basically exterminated people, 100,000 people from the air. John Foster Dulles, who was then one of the directors of the United Council of Churches, came out against it in the days after the bombing.
Really? I didn't know that about Dulles.
Yeah, and it was based on, and the United Council of Churches itself came out against it. It was basically with this, I might say, fleeting recognition that we had deliberately targeted hundreds of thousands for death, vast majority women and children, in Hiroshima, and almost all civilians in Nagasaki. And so there was a moral outrage. It wasn't, yes, you have all these arguments about it was a terrible war and it might help end the war and there was so much carnage elsewhere. This was just another one. That was all understood at the time. But there also was, for a while, a certain moral outrage over the U.S., where we're supposedly above this, deliberately did this. It wasn't, we thought we were hitting a military base and we killed, 130,000 people. We knew very well what was going to happen. So, but as I've written so many articles and books for 30 years, the official narrative took hold quickly that this was absolutely necessary. There were no alternatives, and it's gotten shaky over time, but it's still pretty much held with the U.S. media, with many historians, with certainly with U.S. presidents. No U.S. president except for Eisenhower has ever really spoken out about it. So it's an enduring narrative, but I'd argue it's a very dangerous one.
Yeah. Well, now, it's one that, like I was saying, I learned about it in 5th grade, and I think I was probably lucky that I had a social studies teacher who made it ambiguous at all, that there was really an argument at all about whether it was worth it to do such a horrible thing. But at the end of the discussion, basically, the lesson was it was our side that did it. And Harry Truman,
right.
Why, he was a great American president. And so what more do you need to know, really, other
right.
than, again, he wouldn't have done it if he didn't have to do it,
right.
kind of an argument. And yet, it's funny just it's almost like all of history is just the lie they told on the news that day, written down permanently, just like the kind of nonsense we hear on TV every day. Right now, if you look at this argument for a minute, it breaks down on even just the unconditional surrender terms. Well, they could have made it conditional, and they would have had their peace already.
Well, they did make it conditional after we used the bomb. We let them keep the emperor. That was the main condition. So, no, I think listen. Well-meaning people can have a full debate on this. So you can say it's not black and white. It's not an easy historical question unless you want to take the strictly moral, never kill civilians view. But the point is, and what I've been struggling with for 30 years, is that the official narrative is so overwhelmingly in the other direction. Now, polls are more split. Let's say maybe it's 55-45 people support the use of the bomb. But in the media, that's certainly not true, and in official circles and in the U.S. Congress.
I'm actually impressed by those numbers. Could you say that again? 55-35?
Yeah, no, 55-40, maybe 55-40, 45. It's gotten a little more, over the years. There's a few more people against it, but that's separate from this overwhelming narrative that it was necessary, and that's what I keep. I posted something today that just a couple years ago, Jon Stewart had the temerity to make an offhand comment on the Daily Show that maybe Truman, maybe shouldn't have used the bomb, maybe shouldn't have used it, and he got so much criticism. He came on the next day and apologized for that, which was kind of sickening.
Yeah.
Well,
and in fact, I think, Greg, what had happened was someone in an interview had challenged him. Well, on the basis of, I forget whether they were arguing about Iraq or something else, and they said, well, so then is Harry Truman was that a war crime when he nuked Hiroshima? And Stewart agreed that, yes, that was a war crime. And then the next day when he apologized, he didn't have any explanation for why it wasn't a war crime. He just said, no, of course, that's ridiculous. But without any explanation as to what was ridiculous about it. Deliberately blowing up 100,000 civilians in an instant.
Yeah, well, again, people can disagree on that, but the fact that if anyone has the guts to really challenge the narrative, they get incredible pushback. In 1995, which was at the 50th anniversary, which was really, you might say, the U.S. attempted to come to terms with this. There was massive coverage. Of course, I had a book myself with Robert J. Lifton, cover stories on Time and Newsweek, all kinds of TV specials and so forth. So there was massive coverage of the 50th anniversary. And almost all of it, although they paid tribute to those that were killed and the survivors and so forth, ultimately almost everyone came down at the end to, well, it was necessary. The one TV person who had ended by concluding differently was Peter Jennings, who did a special on ABC that I think might be still up at YouTube. And so he looked at the historical record, looked at it carefully, talked to experts, and in the end he said, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. He was vilified. People called for his firing. All sorts of nasty things were said about him. And he was the one guy. So, you just don't dare speak out too loudly against that narrative.
Yeah, I think everybody should read Catch-22. That'll destroy any mythology about World War II you believe at all, to look through Heller's lens for just a minute. All right, hang on, everybody. We'll be right back with the great Greg Mitchell in just a sec. Hey, Al Scott here. If you've got a band, a business, a cause, or campaign, and you need stickers to help promote, check out thebumpersticker.com at thebumpersticker.com. They digitally print with solvent ink, so you get the photo quality results of digital with the strength and durability of old-style screen printing. I'm sure glad I sold the bumpersticker.com to Rick back when. He's made a hell of a great company out of it, and there are thousands of satisfied customers who agree with me, too. Let the bumpersticker.com help you get the word out. That's the bumpersticker.com at thebumpersticker.com. All right, you guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. It's Hiroshima Day, so we're talking with Greg Mitchell, who has spent a great many years specializing on the subject of Truman's nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it reminds me of my favorite quote of Lew Rockwell, which is simply, of course, Harry Truman is a monster, was a monster. And he just says it so matter-of-factly. He's so much better spoken than I am, Lew Rockwell. He just makes it sound, that of course just really does the trick. He could convince anyone with a simple statement that there's really just no denying it. And in fact, if you go to LewRockwell.com, you can find an article by the great historian Ralph Rako called Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is just great. I mean, you got to read it. But one of the most important points in there is he says, listen, despite all the talk about however many, and the argument about however many American lives would probably have been lost in the invasion, imagine if the Americans had done an invasion just of Hiroshima and rounded up all the men, women, and children. Like you said, Greg, it was mostly women and children. The men were all off at war. The elderly were there. And what if they had just rounded them up in the center of town and machine gunned them all to death, which is something, out of what the Gestapo was doing in Eastern Europe in the war with the Russians, that kind of thing. Then that would have, there's no question that would have been the most horrible thing ever. And yet somehow we're supposed to rationalize the atomic bomb. But when you put it that way, then you realize that there really is no justifying this, especially when you're talking about trading the lives of women and children for GIs, conscripted as they were.
Well, the main argument for using the bomb is, it prevented this U.S. invasion, which would have killed tens of thousands of Americans and many more Japanese. And, of course, there was an invasion planned for later that year. November, I think, would be the first leg, and then the more major wasn't even until, I think, the following March. So this was, several months off. So the argument is that without the bomb, we would have had this invasion. The invasion would have cost all these lives, and ergo, we had to do it. But, of course, that leaves out the argument that maybe something could have happened back in August that would have ended the war without the invasion, which was, quite a ways off. And that's where the argument has to be, although most Americans are not really aware of that. You still, at this late date, you still get the overwhelming response that, it saved lives because we were going to lose all these, and often it's put in personal terms. My father, my grandfather was steaming the Pacific and would have died in this invasion. Mm-hmm. But the point is always, would there have ever been an invasion? Because, without the use of the bomb, since Japan was making half-hearted or full-hearted attempts to surrender, and the Soviets, as we had demanded and they had agreed, were about to enter the war on August 8th, and the Japanese were more terrified of the Soviets than they were of the Americans. And so even Truman had written in his diary a few days earlier saying that when the Soviets declared war, "Finny Japs," when that occurs, that's without the use of the bomb. So, again, you don't know exactly how this would have played out. The Japanese may have not surrendered despite having their military was devastated, and now the Soviets were attacking. So you don't know. You don't know if they would have accepted our conditional surrender terms if we'd put them forth on August 6th. But there certainly is a good chance of it, and I've just always argued that when you kill 120,000 or more in Hiroshima, and 90,000 or more in Nagasaki, and the vast majority are women and children, the weight of evidence has to be on your side, and some of us don't think the weight of evidence is on the side that was really necessary.
Right. And now, there's a couple more things there too, which is that the reason that they targeted, or isn't it the case, Greg, that the reason they targeted Hiroshima and Nagasaki is because they really weren't military towns, or just barely, and that was why they hadn't already been burnt to the ground. So They made great target practice. Right,
though they wanted a clean, if you want to use that word, look at what the results would be. And Nagasaki didn't even have a major base, and Hiroshima had one. So, and in any case, the bombs were not dropped over the military bases. If you wanted to argue that this was a purely military strike, you'd say, well, we aimed it at this military base on the edge of Hiroshima, and we didn't know the 100,000 civilians were going to die. But that wasn't even what they tried to do. So you can't even make that argument. Yet, as I wrote a piece today that in the carefully crafted speech that Truman gave hours after the attack, he said, today we have struck Hiroshima, a military base, no mention of it being a city or anything. So, it shows the sensitivity they had for publicity, but not for, stopping them from doing the attack.
Yeah. Well, and then Truman also, when asked, how come you didn't drop a third one, since it still took him a couple of more days to surrender, he said, I was gonna, but I just thought all those women and children.
Right. He said, I didn't want to burn up anymore.
He's conceding that, right? The first two, too, Harry,
Well, that's, and then the tragedy of Nagasaki, among other things, is that it was sort of on the assembly line. No one has been able to find a specific order to drop the bomb on Nagasaki. It was just, Truman gave the okay around August 1st that, drop bombs when ready. And so the Hiroshima bomb was ready. The weather was okay for August 6th. And then no one stopped, Truman. There's no record of someone even having a major meeting with Truman and saying, Harry, should we hold off on the second one for a few days? It was just strictly assembly line.
Test the implosion
that's
system for that.
Assembly line, devastation. So
that's just incredible. He did not even retain the specific authority per nuke. He just said, "Go ahead and go, guys."
Yeah, well, he retained it, but he didn't exercise it. I mean, If we'd had a third, and I think we did have a third one that was ready. I said, but I think the order was probably, went in after the second. I guess if we could have easily, if the Nagasaki run had gone off a day earlier, maybe we would have used the third before it was stopped.
Wow. All right, y'all. Greg Mitchell's new book, and it's an ebook too, available there at Amazon with the rest of them, is Atomic Cover-Up: 2 U.S. Soldiers, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the Greatest Movie Never Made. And go to Amazon.com and just search for Greg Mitchell there at Amazon, and you'll find his whole collection of, all kinds of different books too, but a whole collection of books about Hiroshima and how the American population and media and government have handled the issue over all these years, and all this great stuff. It's just great stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you.
And you can find his great blog at Pressing Issues. GregMitchellWriter.blogspot.com. Hey, all, Scott here. If you're like me, you need coffee. Lots of it. And you probably prefer it tastes good, too. Well, let me tell you about Darren's Coffee Company at darrenscoffee.com. Darren Marion is a natural entrepreneur who decided to leave his corporate job and strike out on his own, making great coffee. And Darren's Coffee is now delivering right to your door. Darren gets his beans direct from farmers around the world, all specialty, premium grade with no filler. Hey, the man just wants everyone to have a chance to taste this great coffee. Darren's Coffee. Order now at darrenscoffee.com. Use promo code Scott and save $2. darrenscoffee.com. Hey, all, Scott Horton here. It's always safe to say that one should keep at least some of your savings in precious metals as a hedge against inflation. And if this economy ever does heat back up and the banks start expanding credit, rising prices could make metals a very profitable bet. Since 1977, Robertson Roberts Brokerage Inc. has been helping people buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And they do it well. They're fast, reliable, and trusted for more than 35 years. And they take Bitcoin. Call Robertson Roberts at 1-800-874-9760 or stop by rrbi.co. Hey, Al, Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for The Future of Freedom, the monthly journal of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Edited by libertarian purist Sheldon Richman, The Future of Freedom brings you the best of our movement. Featuring articles by Richman, Jacob Hornberger, James Bovard, and many more, The Future of Freedom stands for peace and liberty and against our criminal world empire and Leviathan state. Subscribe today. It's just $25 per year for the back pocket size print edition, $15 per year to read it online. That's The Future of Freedom at fff.org/subscribe. Peace and freedom. Thank you.